Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with another edition of Rudy's Common Sense, Rudy CS. Today, we're going to talk about the situation in Iran, which I'm sure you know about, the protests that are going on and the genesis of them, but I don't think most of you know about the history of this, how deep the roots are, and how much this is not the beginning of a protest movement. I'm not going to say it's the end of it, but I think we're much closer to the end than we are to the beginning. And Alireza, Jeff Sadati could explain this to you better than anyone. I know you remember him. We've had him on several other podcasts. He probably knows as much as anyone about what's going on inside Iran in his work for the Iranian resistance movement, the overall movement, and the coalition that's run by Madame Rajavi. And they are in close contact with what's going on in their headquarters in Paris and in Albania. So I think we can probably get the most current information from my good friend and a great friend of America and a true Iranian patriot who has literally put his life at risk to do this. Alireza, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Always a great pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, for me too. For me too. So I'm going to let you tell us the beginning of this current movement. And then we'll go on from there and go back to the roots of it, which I think people know the current movement pretty well, but let's remind them. But the roots are more important. For those who don't know, how did this all start?
Well, it all started with the murder of a 22-year-old girl named Mahsa Amini, an ordinary girl who had just come from her little town in Kurdish region in Iran, in Kurdistan province in Sakes, to Tehran to just visit. And then she was handpicked by what they call the morality police for apparently violating the dress code. And then she was practically beaten to death, and she went to coma. And then after a few days, she died. And then at the same moment that her death was announced, that acted as a trigger that really was applied to the powder keg, which is the whole Iran. And the whole country exploded. It started with the Kurdish region and then expanded to everywhere else. In a matter of hours, so many cities got involved. As we speak, all the 31 provinces of Iran have been engulfed in these protests. We have recorded 198 cities. One of them is actually the capital, Tehran. And over 400 people have been killed by the Iran regime. Many of them very young, over 32 of them are teenagers below the age of 18. And they have arrested over 20,000 protesters, hoping that the killings and the arrests would put down the revolt. Not only it hasn't happened, but 6 weeks into the start of these protests, the momentum is only gaining. There's nothing that the regime has done so far that has worked for them. It has only added more fuel to the fire. And this is the fire of the Iranian revolution. What you're displaying in Iran is a revolution in the making.
So the immediate protests go back to about September. It was in September, right? 6 weeks ago. That she was beaten and killed, and exactly what was her violation of the dress code?
Well, all the films and videos they have, she really didn't have any violations based on their own dress codes. But, if a little portion of your hair is shown, because the mandatory rule under the mullahs, which is very repressive, this has nothing to do with our religion or our culture, is they have to cover, from head to toe and only show their face and their hands. That's all. And they can, they have a repressive force just dedicated for that. They have 20 different repressive organs. One of them whose job is only to go in the streets, look for women who have shown a little bit of their hair, and just arrest them, beat them, so that that would act as an example for the rest of the population. This is a misogynist regime. So they have to exert their authority on the population, particularly against women, and that's what happened.
So she showed a little bit of her hair, and for that she was beaten and killed. Now, does that happen regularly, or was she picked out, or do they beat every woman who shows a little bit of her hair?
Well, definitely this wasn't a single case, and it's a history behind it. The whole purpose of these morality police, so-called, is to really show the authority of the Ayatollahs, particularly against women. Many women have been arrested like this, beaten to death, and since the killing of Mahsa Amini, there were several other women, some of them younger than she was, 16 years old, 17 years old, who were murdered, for the same reason. So I think, this shows that this regime is all about repression, is all about killing. And that's why the people want to overthrow this regime in its entirety.
So was there a particular thing about this that ignited the whole country? I mean, this does happen, if not regularly, it happens often enough that it could have been a month earlier or 2 months earlier, or it could happen again today. Why did this become a nationwide and now worldwide situation?
Well, this is like the example of the straw that broke the camel's back. There is a history of, anger by the Iranian population, because the issue is not limited to exerting mandatory hijab on the women. Every sector of the Iranian society, whether it's men or women, they're workers, they're students, they're, peasants, physicians, anybody, you name it, they have been plundered by the regime. They have been repressed by the regime. Iran is a very rich country. 2/3 of the Iran has the second largest oil and gas reserves in the world. Yet 2/3 of the Iranian population live below the poverty line. The mullahs and the Revolutionary Guards commanders are the ones who are controlling a tremendous wealth of our country, leaving people poor. They find new ways to repress the whole population. They rule by the Revolutionary Guards. And that's why all of these resentments of the population were just basically percolating over the years, just looking for an opportunity to explode. And I want to add one more thing, is that, people might have heard about the history of repression in Iran, how they kill people, they hang people, they execute people, and all of that. But they may not know that even the bigger reality of Iran is the resistance against it. There is 40 years of resistance against the Ayatollahs, and it hasn't happened just, in the past 2 months. 40 years of opposition to them.
Let's take a short break. Well, there couldn't be a better opportunity to point out to you the contributions of Patriot Mobile. I mean, in this fight for freedom in Iran, or the fight for freedom in the United States, to protect life, to protect the right to defend yourself, to protect the right of free speech, there's been no group that exceeds the contribution of Patriot Mobile. They've been right there in the fight for conservative Christian values. And they are the only provider of internet services and that is completely dedicated to the conservative Christian causes, to the values that are the most important to you and me. And inflation has made it very, very difficult for all of us. And they are aware of that, and they have plenty of budget plans available to fit your needs. So contact them so you will get the best service you can possibly get, that's good or better than anybody else. At the same time, you'll be contributing to the things that are most important to you, your freedom, because they fight for your freedom. So go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy or call 972-PATRIOT And use the offer code Rudy when you when you do it, because you'll get free activation. If you use the code Rudy, you'll get free activation. And if you're a veteran or first responder, inquire as to the special offers that exist and the benefits for them, as there should be. Again, call patriotmobile.com/Rudy, patriotmobile.com/Rudy, or 972-PATRIOT. Thank you for returning to the interview with Alireza. Pretty compelling, very compelling. And I want to get to that, because I think that's really the part of this that the American people and many of the people in the West don't really properly appreciate and understand. Both the immediate history of this that goes back about 4 or 5 years, and then the total history of it that goes back to the beginning of the regime and your resistance, your organization's resistance, and all of the organizations that now come together in the coalition. So this immediate situation has led to 180, 190 protests, would you say?
Yes, in 198 cities, and it's expanding. Yes.
This is in the face of being threatened with being killed on the spot.
Yes, this is despite all the killings that's happening. You know, universities have gotten involved. We have the names of over 92 universities all over the country who have been involved in the demonstrations against the regime. Just this week, we recorded 27 different universities that were simultaneously protesting against the regime, expelling the regime's agents and their representatives. They go to universities. They're chanting "Death to Khamenei," "Death to dictator," "Death to the oppressor," be it the Shah or the leader, meaning Khamenei. They're clearly, the population are rejecting any kind of dictatorship, whether it was the Shah's single-party rule that had the secret police savak, or the current theocracy of the mullahs, who are even more repressive. They want to reject that, and they want a free Iran, a democratic Iran, a republic form of government where all sectors of society, no matter what their ethnicity is, what their religion is, what their background is, they can be equally represented and enjoy freedom and democracy.
A brief thumbnail history of Iran since the revolution is only been 2 ayatollahs, right?
Yes, 2 supreme leaders.
This is the second one, Khomeini and Khamenei. And when you talk about the mullahs, I think it's really important to let the American people know these are like mafia bosses in their region. They're not religious leaders. They're very wealthy, right? They make enormous amounts of money. They feed off their people. They extort money from their people, and they extort behavior from their people and complete obedience. The mullahs are more or less the outreach of the dictator. If it were Hitler, they'd be the outreach of Hitler, or if it was Stalin, they'd be the outreach of Stalin. Or they're not Muslim religious leaders, although they pretend to be. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They're all of those things you said combined with the cover of the religion. They hide themselves behind the religion of Islam. By the way, the vast majority of the people of Iran who are now demonstrating in the streets of Iran are Muslims, and they're Shia, and they're saying, these mullahs don't represent us. The leading opposition movement against the Ayatollahs is Muslim, the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK. You mentioned Mrs. Rajavi. She herself is a Muslim, a devoted Muslim, but she says that these Ayatollahs have actually stolen our revolution. She said that they need to be denied not only power, but also, taking hostage our religion, taking advantage of it. And they try to use that to dominate the Muslim nations in the region. Look what they're doing in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Yemen, and other places, all of it done under the cover of the religion. So when the revolution comes, and it will definitely come, you will see a huge change, not just in Iran, but everywhere else. And what a great prospect.
So now let's go back to to the demonstrations that have been going on, it seems to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, continuously for the last 4 or 5 years that have not been given sufficient attention. But even without this incident, when I looked at these demonstrations, they're at a very advanced point in the process of overthrowing a regime. You've had demonstrations in every city numerous times. You've had people out on the street for the last 4 or 5 years denouncing the Ayatollah, calling for his end. You've had the American flag being raised. This has been going on continuously. Tell us how that began and how that proceeded. And also tell us the role of the MEK, because there's a lot of misinformation on purpose about the MEK. The best thing for people to know about the MEK is the Ayatollah and his henchmen have identified the MEK as their most dangerous enemy. And in fact, in one very, very revealing comment, as the only group that could actually replace him. So forget the State Department, forget everybody else. The best source here is the Ayatollah, who believes that the MEK is his greatest threat and his greatest danger. But take us to how these the most immediate history of the protests going back about 4 or 5 years ago.
And what's the more immediate, yes, exactly. The more immediate one in the past 4 or 5 years, actually in December 2017. Every time the protests broke out, they broke out on a different issues. Like at that time, it was the rise of the prices of the eggs and chicken. That the protest started in the second most populated city in Mashhad and then expanded to everywhere. The regime brought in brute force, and in several days they managed to control the situation. But they knew this is going to come back. And then the situation just kept coming back every time under different things. Like in November 2019, they raised the price of gasoline 3 times higher overnight. And when people woke up, the gas price was 3 times higher. That triggered an instant reaction, and then everybody else got involved. The regime killed 1,500 people in a matter of few days, thinking, okay, that we managed to control the population. Then came the, in January 2020, when the regime downed the passenger Ukrainian plane in Iran, firing a missile and, killing, a large number of everybody who was on board. And then, that triggered a lot of the protests. What happened was that then came the COVID-19 actually came to the help of the regime. The regime refused vaccines from the United States and others. They wanted to take advantage of the lockdown so people would not be able to come to the street. They'll only be thinking about their lives and staying alive and all of that. Well, they bought maybe about 2 years of time. That is over now. And, with the COVID, without the COVID, it's over. People are in the streets now, and as we saw right now. And every time we had these rounds of protests, it became deeper, it was elevated, it was sharper, it was more motivated, and more people got involved. But as you mentioned, there is a history about that. And of course, the Mujahideen Khalq, the main organized force against the Ayatollahs, they have been fighting this regime since day one, since the time that the Ayatollahs took power in Iran in 1979.
And the regime has been killing them since then. Regularly and sometimes in large numbers. They've also attempted to kill you, Alireza.
Right. The killings in Iran started in large numbers in June of 1981. That the MEK was doing a lot of open activities at the time and holding rallies and everything. They were attacking them. And it came a point that the MEK called a huge rally of about 500,000 people in Tehran. And that was like the last open activity. And then the regime ordered killing them all, and the mass killings started. And then every day they were killing 200, 300 of the MEK members. These are all very young people. You mentioned the mass killings. I have a book in front of me. I don't know if we can see it here.
They can see it. I have that book right back there.
Exactly. It has the names and particulars of 20,000 members of the MEK executed by the regime. And it has all the names and particulars, all of the details, which city they were killed, A lot of the pictures of the people who were killed by the regime. A lot of young people. You can see the pictures here. A lot of women are among them. A good percentage of them were women. These were all people who were handpicked by the regime and killed over the years. Just in the summer of 1988, when Khomeini, the first supreme leader, issued a fatwa, particularly against the MEK, saying that anyone who is in any way associated with the MEK and remains loyal to them must be executed. It doesn't matter, what they had or they hadn't done. And in a matter of 3 months, actually less than that, about 2 months, as many as 30,000 political prisoners were murdered in the Iranian prisons, including in Evin, Bohardash, Tehran, and other places.
When was that?
This was in summer of 1988, starting in July of 1988, July, August, and then extending to September. And then one of the people heavily involved in the massacre was Ebrahim Raisi, who is now the handpicked by the Supreme Leader Khamenei to become the president of the regime. He was one of the 4 members of the Death Commission that oversaw all of that and determined the fate of every prisoner, which one will get killed or which one will survive.
So his history is as a mass murderer.
Absolutely, Raisi is a mass murderer, and honestly, Mayor, the reason Raisi was handpicked by Khamenei about a year ago to become the president, because Khamenei could see what's happening, what would be ahead of it. He has seen what happened in 2017, 2018, 2019. So he wanted someone at the helm that will be ruthless, repressive, and has the experience of fighting the MEK, because Khamenei knew that the engine for change, engine behind all of these protests, are actually the resistance units of the MEK. These are very young people who lead the protests, who direct them, who ensure the continuity, ensure that the protests remain focused on Khamenei, on overthrowing the regime. And that's why they brought in Raisi, hoping that this will frighten the population. Well, look what's happening. The whole thing has backfired. This project of bringing Raisi to prevent the restart of the uprisings has been a major, major failure. And that's why this is really the last card the regime has played. There is really nothing else left in their arsenal.
Now, the Ayatollah and Raisi have made statements that indicate that they understand how well prepared the resistance is to govern, should they be able to overthrow the Ayatollah and the organized criminals around him, the murderers. But explain to the American people, from Madame Rajavi, on down to the thousands and thousands, or the 100,000 that showed up in Paris when they attempted to bomb us, right? Explain how ready you are, because very often the American people have had the experience of we overthrow one dictator, and there's a vacuum. This is a perfect situation in which there's no vacuum. The people are ready to come in and take over tomorrow as a transition to, but you go and explain how ready they are and how long they've been ready. And we don't have, this is not, we have to guess like we've had a few times. We've got the group that can run the country so the country gets the opportunity to transition. Right.
Exactly. The whole purpose is for the people of Iran to be able to have representation. It's not about, one group or one person or entity ruling the country. The whole purpose of this movement has always been to overthrow the Iranian regime and let the people of Iran to determine their future, their future leaders, their form of government, to be able to, their vote to actually count. And that's why, Mrs. Rajavi, the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is a coalition headquartered in Paris, she offered a 10-point plan for the future of Iran based on the ratifications within the parliament in exile that says, for the future of Iran, the only criteria is actually the vote of the ballot box. And then based on separation of church and state, equal rights for men and women, freedom of press, freedom of political parties, gender equality, freedom of religion, that no religion, whether it's Islam or others, would be having an advantage or disadvantage, and peace in the Middle East, a modern legal system as opposed to the Sharia law that justifies all the killings under the cover of the religion, and also a non-nuclear Iran. This parliament in exile has committed that once the Ayatollahs is overthrown, there is going to be a transitional period, and there's going to be a provisional government that will rule Iran for no longer than 6 months. Their main task within this 6 months period is to set up for free and fair elections, and then to run the affairs of the country. Once that free elections is held, then that would lead to the formation of a national and constituent assembly. And then they will submit their resignation once the assembly is in place to them. So those representatives of the people will draft the constitution, will determine the future of the government, and anything else afterwards. The whole purpose is to have a sovereign nation based on the will of the people. And of course, this is not going to happen by itself unless you pay the price, unless you fight the Ayatollahs on the street. And that's what's really happening on the ground. And I mentioned the whole history of the resistance, the high price that has been paid in the past. And those who say that, what if the Ayatollahs are overthrown, and, what if it becomes like Syria or other countries, it's absolutely not comparable to any of those countries, because unlike those countries, there is an alternative. There is an organized force on the ground, and it's been battle tested. It has paid the price. It has a plan and a platform. It has a structure on the ground, not just outside of the country. These resistance units, those who are actually fighting on the ground. And also in those countries, you had the influence of Islamic extremists who were dominating the affairs of those countries because they didn't have an alternative on the ground, and they had the influence of the Ayatollahs who were moving things in the wrong direction. In the case of Iran, you have the alternative. You are actually overthrowing the same Ayatollahs who are the troublemakers everywhere else. And also, Iran is a nation state. Thousands of years of a history with its own culture and all of that. That's why you see right now, as the protests are going on, you have the Kurds, you have the Baluchis, you have the Azeris, you have the Lurs, people from different sectors of society. They're all united. They're all protesting against the regime. Right. There's no differences between those who are Arabs in down Khuzestan, or the Baluchis southeast of Iran, or the Kurds in the western part of the country, or those in central Tehran. They're all united in one thing: overthrowing the Ayatollahs, rejecting the dictatorship of the Shah and the current theocracy of the rulers, and establishing freedom of democracy and a republic form of government.
And although Madam Rajavi and her organization is the core organization that's been in it, throughout, this is support. This is a multi-faceted group of people. I mean, I'm talking now from my own observations of over a decade of coming to your meetings, and particularly the 100,000 people meetings. I mean, it's pretty impressive to be able to bring in 100,000 people. But I mean, how many different organizations are part of this coalition? It's the length and breadth of the country, but give people a little sense of that so they understand this is not like one group that wants to take over. The one group gives it cohesion, but it's many, many, many groups.
Absolutely. In addition to this parliament in exile, Mayor, our movement offered over 2 decades ago what we call the National Solidarity Front, saying that, no matter what you think about anything, what kind of political ideas, ideological ideas you have, what you think about any of those issues that I mentioned, as long as we can agree on 3 things. Number 1, rejection and overthrow of the entirety of this regime, not just keeping one faction over the other. Second, to have a republic form of the government, and then the separation of church and state, meaning that we don't want to go back to the dictatorship of the Shah. We don't want to keep any portion of the current theocracy in Iran, and we're looking for the future. And I think what you're seeing in formation right now, all over Iran, different ethnicities, and also outside of Iran, there are protests going on in large numbers from Berlin to Washington to
Oh, no,
other
we've seen them, sure.
capitals around the
Yep,
world, in
yes.
California, in Europe. People are all being united, focused on this principle. In Berlin, about 100,000 people showed up just this past Saturday. It's huge, the largest similar gathering outside of Iran in an open place, which was very similar to the rally we had in 2018 in Paris, which you were there. It was actually inside, and 100,000 people had come there, and that's the event you mentioned that the regime wanted to bomb. And then people were chanting.
When you say wanted to bomb, that's not just the people were arrested, and it was, one of them was a diplomat, an Iranian diplomat, an official of the government. And this is the second time. Earlier that year, there was another group that was arrested in Albania for wanting to bomb the New Year's celebration at the new facility. And I mean, we don't have time to go through them, but you've been the subject of this. And
absolutely,
you're
right.
The point of this that I'm trying to make is the fact that this hasn't been covered the way it should, unfortunately, leaves a vacuum of information. But the people that matter, meaning the oppressors, the Ayatollah, and they understand who and what you are and the danger that you present, the ability to overthrow them and the ability to govern to a transition, and that's why they're killing you. I mean, and it's amazing that it has this kind of vitality. Also, would you just point out the bipartisan support that you have in the United States, and then, as I've observed, worldwide? When we go to these meetings, there are people from the British Parliament present and retired from all different parties, and there's as much support in the Republican Party as in the Democratic Party. I mean, it may be the only time we ever sit together anymore, meaning Republicans and Democrats, right? But please explain in the United States the bipartisan support that you have. Time to take a short break. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. Thank you for returning to the interview with Alireza. Pretty compelling, very compelling.
Of course, because of the uprising and the protests and the revolution in the making in Iran, there's a lot of attention. A lot of people gotten involved in all of that. But there were, for many, many years, there was very little attention to Iran. But there were those who were working like day in and day out under the most, difficult circumstances where prospects for change seemed to be very bleak. Yet they continued the resistance and trying to build a coalition. You mentioned the members of Congress. There is a very large bipartisan coalition built, let's say on the House side, for instance. Right now, there is a resolution, HRS 118, that has 257 co-sponsors, obviously from both sides of the aisle. It's unprecedented. There's no other resolution like that, and it specifically talks about the need to have a free democratic republic Iran. It talks about, notes Mrs. Mariam Rajavi's 10-point plan and goes through the details of the 10-point plan, just basically showing, how much Congress has been following up on that in a bipartisan way. In the Senate side, we have on one side and Senator Bob Menendez, who is the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations.
I would have to say one of the most active over a decade now.
Yes, over 2-3 decades. He's been on top of Iran issue and he's been very supportive. And every time we have an event and he sends a message or speaks at those events. He's been supporting the goal of the Iranian resistance for a free Iran. He has been sending messages to our leader. He is addressing a lot of those events. And now during the uprisings, he has said that putting out a lot of statements rejecting the regime for what they're doing and asking the administration to do more. The same situation exists on the other side of the aisle. Every time we have an event in the Senate side, we have about a dozen senators who either come in person or send messages via online expressing their support from both sides of the aisle. This is the kind of unity that we've managed to build over the years, and not just in the United States, as you mentioned, in the United Kingdom, in the European Parliament, in France, in Italy, in Belgium, in just about every nation in Europe. We've been working day and night and just trying to educate these members of parliament about what's really happening on the ground. And that's why when these uprisings have now elevated to where they are now, you can see the outpouring support coming from different corners in Europe and the United States. And it just didn't happen overnight. There was a lot of work done over the years. And now it's paying off.
I'm only smiling because I probably shouldn't say, I just have a feeling that we're much closer to the end than the beginning, and tell us realistically, how surprised would you be if over the course of let's make it a year to 2 years, there was a change in regime?
Definitely, I'm very, very optimistic that it would be much shorter than that. Obviously, revolutions are things you cannot predict. It has never been predicted rightly in anywhere else in the world. But one thing you can count on, and you can rely on, is your resolve. Your preparation, what you have on the ground, your commitment, your plan, your leadership, your structure, your organizational capabilities on the ground, but both inside Iran, which is the most important, because at the end of the day, the final word comes from the people inside Iran, the network we have inside Iran, those who are paying the price, those who are organizing, those who are fighting off the repressive forces in the streets of Tehran and over 198 cities around the country. So I think this is what we're counting on. And I think there is a role for the international community that they can play a role that could be very helpful. It could
Absolutely.
be, a harmful role, or they could play a helpful role. The harmful role has been, if you continue to just negotiate with the regime, give them legitimacy, give them money, relieving sanctions or anything like that, that's destructive, that's harmful, not just to the change in Iran, but also to the values of those nations, whether it's the United States or Europe. But if you want to be helpful, you want to stand on the side of the people of Iran, on the right side of history, you want to defend those protesters. You want to, first of all, they need to understand that this is not business as usual. This is a revolution in the making. They better take sides with the, with the people of Iran. Second, they need to recognize the right for self-defense for the people of Iran, their right to overthrow the regime, because those people, when they're pushed to the corner, when they're being killed in the street for just speaking up against the regime, they need to have a way to defend themselves against the revolutionary guards. They need to have the right to fight back, and this needs to be announced by the world leaders. This is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is how a lot of the changes around the world has actually taken place. This is how the people in Ukraine are doing, defending themselves against an aggression by the Russians. In the case of Iran, it's the mullahs who have taken over our country, we need to fight them back. And I think if they do the right thing within this period, they can actually be very helpful to the change in Iran. They can help speed up things, and bring down the Ayatollahs a lot faster than people can think.
Well, I think that's been a very, very helpful analysis, Alireza, as usual. We'll be back to you frequently because I happen to think that this may be truly a moment of real change. But in any event, am I right if I say the following very definitively? Nothing is going to stop this revolution. This is going to continue. It doesn't matter if it gets supported, it doesn't get supported, it gets supported a lot, it gets supported. Those people and your people are determined to be free. And it ends when they become free.
I think you're absolutely correct, Mayor. One thing I can tell you for sure, no matter what happens in the coming days and weeks and months, obviously there may be a lot of ups and downs, and the regime may kill more people, and they will try to put a pause on it. What happens, it's never going to go back to pre-September 2022 situation. That's one thing. Second, the process that has started, at the end of the day, it's a revolution in the making. How long it takes, we don't know, but it very much is affected by our own work, our own dedication, our own planning on the ground. Nothing is going to happen by itself. The resistance in Iran, the protests, the uprising for revolution is organized. It's on the right course. There's a lot more coming in the coming days. There has to be more price to be paid. And I think people have shown that they're willing to do it. And the international community must do its own job. And then we'll see definitely for sure, no doubt about it, a free and democratic Republic Iran.
I have no doubt about it either. And I am just honored to be associated with your movement. It's been one of the things that I take the most pride in, and I feel it's one of the greatest contributions any of us can make. And there are so many of my colleagues, Republican and Democrat, people who disagree with each other about everything else, where there's just unanimous agreement here. And also, I think, a unanimous agreement and confidence in this process that you have. I mean, so you keep going, Alireza, and please be available to inform the American people. They need to know more about this. And of course, give my sincere regards to Madame Rajavi, who is, I can't describe how great a woman she is.
Well, I want to thank you, Mayor. I know this is the beauty of, this era now, the beauty of a democracy, beauty of, things are overlaps with the human values. What a lot of your colleagues have done. There are a lot of people, as you correctly mentioned, who disagree on so many different issues. There are people, on the left, on the right, Republicans, Democrats, or people independent. They have all come together, and despite all of their differences on one issue, and that's the freedom of the people of Iran, which actually serves the interests of the whole world, honestly speaking. And I want to thank you and commend you for the work you've done over the years. And I think the people of Iran will never forget their friends in the United States, in Europe, everywhere else in the world, who have stood on their side and supported them and been their voice, or have allowed their voice to be echoed. And I'm looking forward to the day of a free Iran, to welcome all of our friends in the US and Europe to Iran.
My great dream is to be with you and Farzin and Madame Rajavi and all of our good friends right in Tehran, celebrating freedom. God bless you.
God bless you, Mayor. Thank you so much.
And you're going to prevail.
Thank you.
Well, that was a darn good explanation of where we stand right now in Iran, and how this set of protests that you've been seeing over the last 2 months is not from out of the blue, as it might appear to many people, that this is a long process, an immediate process of about 4 or 5 years, going back to 2017, of protest after protest after protest. Before these protests in 193 cities, there were protests in every one of those cities, multiple protests by doctors, nurses, teachers, regular citizens, construction workers, almost every facet of society calling for the overthrow of the Ayatollah and the overthrow of his gangster, which is what it is, regime, but it's worse than a gangster regime. It's a regime of homicidal maniacs. Aside from maybe China, I can't think of a country that's killed more of its own people and continues to kill more of its own people. But now, the more they kill, the stronger the protests become. That's the sign of protests that are reaching their goal. And as I said to Alireza in concluding, there's nothing that's going to stop this. This is just going to continue. These people, when I say these people, I mean the MEK that you saw Alireza talk about, the many, many allied groups with them outside of Iran, and most importantly, the people inside of Iran who may disagree on many things and are of different nationalities. They want freedom. And when people want freedom, and when people have already demonstrated that you can't kill them and stop them, and they have the blood of their brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers and children to vindicate, you're not stopping them. I know this personally. I've been involved with them for over a decade. I've been in many parts of the world with them. And I've been at gigantic gatherings in which we were slated for death twice with them. It hasn't stopped me, and it hasn't stopped them. And it hasn't stopped many people of all different political opinions. I mean, I introduced Patrick Kennedy at these gatherings. I deal with Democrats that, my goodness, you wouldn't think we would have a community of interest, and we do. And we probably have a lot more of them too, and it also helps that. The protest that I'm talking about, that where they slated us for extermination, included Speaker Gingrich. We were 2 of 30 speakers, and they wanted to kill us, get rid of us. Same thing with the New Year's celebration that year. So pay attention to this. This has deep roots, firm conviction, and a really, really exceptional, bipartisan, national and international group of supporters that can vouch for the effectiveness of this coalition, and even their effectiveness in being able to take over the government and guide it to freedom when they're successful. And it's a matter of when, not if. And I think when, as I said, is closer than you think. I've watched this protest firsthand, in the sense that the MEK provides us with a great deal, probably the best and most accurate information inside of Iran. So I get to see the videos and even the ones that probably don't get enough attention. So I'm not speaking here idly or by myself. I'm speaking for a very, very wide coalition of very knowledgeable Americans and people around the world who value freedom and democracy. This is going to work. Keep paying attention to it. Our media, as they've let us down so often, have let us down on covering this effectively also. That's why they're so much surprised by these protests. I'm not. This is the culmination of years and years of protests, just continuing and getting stronger. So let's get behind freedom for a great nation, what can be a great nation of great people. It could be a very, very important and strong ally for us and for freedom-loving people all over the world. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back in a couple of days with another edition of Rudy's Common Sense. You get us at Rudy Giuliani, CS for commonsense.com. Rudy Giuliani, CS.com. Subscribe. And you'll be able to go back over our 250 prior ones and get information and news that you don't get elsewhere because a lot of this history was not covered. And you're learning it, maybe for the first time, which is unfortunate, but at least we serve a role, not just me, but all of us that do what I do. So support us too. Thank you. God bless you. And of course, God bless America. And thank you, God, for allowing us to live here.